Might help if I unmute us.
I wasn't saying anything, I was just making faces.
Hello, everyone. Was that a delicious sip of coffee, babe? Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Wood, and I'm a student services assistant at East Los Angeles College and a coordinator in a center called One Zone. But specifically, I'm speaking about our LGBTQ plus students. It's a support and retention space, and we're in this virtual world. Welcome to 2020. It's almost done. Thank you, Jesus. So I've been doing stuff at my home. This is my partner, my wife, Anne. She's also going to read today, and she has a book that she's coloring in. I'm going to be reading to you as well. But before we begin, I wanted to, I have a couple of resource announcements for you. So I know for food insecurity, the Garage Board Shop, I've been saying they're in Monterey Park. They're actually in East LA, but they're on Atlantic. The Garage Board Shop, they do weekly food giveaways for the community. If you're in the neighborhood, you've probably seen their line. It's a walk-up service for them weekly on Fridays, the Garage Board Shop. They also have safe space for students. So if you're looking for Wi-Fi or computer access or a place to study or a place to skate, the Garage Board Shop has an indoor place to skate, and they also have resources and a study space. In addition to the food, Eastmont Community Center in Montebello, they do weekly food giveaways on Friday as well. You don't need to register for either one of these. In Boyle Heights, Mi Centro, for LGBTQ specific folks, Mi Centro is affiliated with the main center in West Hollywood or Hollywood. The LGBTQ center, excuse me. So Mi Centro is the local branch, and they do weekly food giveaways specifically for LGBTQ families. It's a small organization, so they only register about 10 families each week, and you do need to contact them to register. Mi Centro in Boyle Heights. As far as campus-wide resources, so a good resource is our Student Health Center. If you go to elac.edu and search for Student Health Center, you'll see there even though campus is closed, we are affiliated with a provider. I believe it's called Via Care, and they are located down the street, and they are on Atlantic also. And you can go there actually in person, and they're doing COVID testing and flu shots and STD testing if you need that, as well as if you need condoms or anything like that, you can go there and pick them up. That's Via Care, and they're on Atlantic. If you've paid, they'll just verify that you've paid your student health fee and provide services. It doesn't matter if you've paid it, they just verify your student ID number, I should have said. They do not provide services if you haven't paid the health fee. I just meant to say that they verify that you're a student. Okay.
Get it right.
Yeah, sorry. I'm still having my coffee.
Decaf.
But still, I'm still having my coffee. Also,
thanks for making it so nice and frothy.
Yay for frothy coffee. My email address is woodcl, that's wood, C as in cat, L as in Larry, at elac.edu. That's woodcl at elac.edu. My name is Lynn, last name is Wood. Feel free to send me an email if you are a student or you know a student who is struggling. They can't take that first step to get going in our system, or they're already applied, but they can't figure out what to do next, or you can't figure out what to do next. I can help you take that next step. It's no problem. Sometimes that's the issue. We have anxiety, or we just need someone to tell us, hey, that's okay, just click here or do this. It's no problem. I don't mind helping you. Feel free to send me an email. The book that I have to read from today, that my dear wife Anne bought, is called The Full of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. And Emma is a lesbian. That's how we came upon her. And it's kind of interesting because well, I'll just read you what it says on the inside of the jacket cover here. It's Dublin, 1918, 3 days in a maternity ward at the height of the Great Flu. In a small world of work, risk, death, and unexpected love by the best-selling author of The Wonder and Room. In an Ireland doubly ravaged by war and disease, Nurse Julia Power works at an understaffed hospital in the city center where expectant mothers who have come down with the terrible new flu are quarantined together. Into Julia's world step two outsiders, Dr. Kathleen Lynn, a rumored rebel on the run from the police, and a young volunteer helper named Bertie Sweeney. In the darkness and intensity of this tiny ward, over 3 days, these women changed one another's lives in unexpected ways, lose patience to the baffling pandemic, but they also shepherd new life into a fearful world with tireless tenderness and humanity. Careers and mothers alike somehow do their impossible work. Once again, Emma Donoghue finds the light in the darkness. Classic of hope and survival against all odds. So I did already begin reading it, and it was just interesting to me in the even the first part of it. Oh, Laura's trying to go under the covers. Even the first part of it, where she's talking about seeing people on the street and they're sanitizing the streets. So don't forget, this is 1918, and it's the flu pandemic that was happening back then.
Even though it is in Ireland.
Yeah, so it was all over.
It was pandemic.
Pandemic, right. So it's just interesting to see the parallels to what's happening today with this horrible pandemic that we're experiencing, and see what was happening in this maternity ward in 1918 are very similar things.
And only the poorest women gave birth in the hospital. If you had money, you had a midwife come to your house. Okay.
Mm.
That's my understanding.
Delicious coffee. If you don't froth your milk for your coffee, you are missing out.
It's not that expensive.
No. Highly recommend oat milk, also barista.
It's called Oatly.
Oatly barista. Okay, let's see. Where was I?
You could dress up like a little barista.
Yeah. I just need their green apron. That's one job I haven't had, is I have come close to working at Starbucks because I have an addiction, which I'm working on. Anyway, I'm still in that first chapter on page 17. I'm just going to begin reading. Whatever keeps me going, Gladys drained her cup, smacked her lips, and left the mug on the dirty dishes table. I didn't want to stay without anyone to talk to, so I collected some watery cocoa and a slice of war bread, which was always dark but varied in its alterations, barley, oat, rye. Certainly, but one might find soy in there too, beans, sago, even the odd chip of wood, because it was the war. Don't forget, they were being rationed.
World War One.
Yeah, World War One, and it was a pandemic. To make some of the time I'd lost finding orderlies to bring Anonymous down to the mortuary, I ate and I drank as I climbed the stairs. Matron, currently in women's fever, would have been appalled by the lapse in manners, as Tim would have said if he were able to say anything these days. Everything was entirely arsewise. I think you get the picture. Full day had broken without my noticing. The late October light stabbed in the east-facing windows. I put the last of the bread in my mouth as I went through the door that bore a handwritten label. Maternity/fever. Not a proper ward, just a supply room converted last month when it became clear to our superiors that not only were expectant women catching this grip in alarming high numbers, but it was particularly hazardous to them and their babies. The ward sister was a lay nurse like myself. Sister Finnegan had overseen my diploma in midwifery, and I'd been flattered last week when she'd chosen me to staff this tiny room with her. Patients admitted with the flu who were well in pregnancy got sent here, and maternity up on the second floor transferred down any woman who had fevers, body aches, or a cough. We'd had no actual deliveries yet, which Sister Finnegan said was a sign of divine mercy, given that our facilities were so primitive. There was a line from our training manual that always stuck in my head. For a woman with child, the surroundings should be such as will promote serenity. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, good luck.
Well, this makeshift ward was more conducive to irritation. It was cramped with battery-powered lamps on each bedside cupboard instead of electric nightlights. At least we had a sink and a window for air, but there was no fireplace, so we had to keep our patients warm by bundling them up. We'd had only 2 metal cots at first, but we crammed in a third so we wouldn't have to turn away Eileen Devine. My eyes went straight to her bed in the middle, between Ida Noonan, who was snoring, and Delilah Garrett, who, in a dressing jacket and a wrap and a scarf, was reading. But in the middle cot was empty, fresh bedding pulled tight. The crust of bread turned to a pebble in my throat. The Barrow women were too ill to have been discharged, surely. From over her magazine, Delia Garrett said in an angry stare. The night nurse heaved herself off the chair. Nurse Power, she said, Sister Luke. The church considered it immodest for nuns to serve in lying in wards, but given the shortage of midwives, matron, who happened to be from the same religious order as Sister Luke, had managed to persuade their higher uppers, to lend their experienced general nurse to maternity fever for the duration, as everyone said. I found I couldn't control my voice enough to ask about Eileen. I drained the cocoa that now tasted like bile and rinsed the cup at the sink. Is Sister Finnegan not in yet? The nurse pointed one finger at the ceiling and said, called to maternity. It had the ring of one of Groynon's playful synonyms for death. Sister Luke adjusted the elastic band of her eye patch. She sounds scary. A puppet pulling on its own string. Like quite a few nuns, she'd volunteered at the front, and shrapnel had sent her home with an eye gone soon. Between her veil and her white mask, the only skin showing was the hinterland around the other eye. She came over to me now and nodded at the striped cot. Poor Mrs. Devine slipped into a coma around 2 a.m. and expired at 5:30.
Shit.
She sketched a cross on the stiff, snow-white gimp that covered her broad chest. My heart squeezed for Eileen. The bone man was making fools of us all. That was what we kids called death in my part of the country, the bone man, that skeletal rider who was kept his grinning skull tucked under one arm as he rode from one victim's house to the next. I hung up my cape and coat without a word and swapped my rain-soaked straw hat for a white cap. I unfolded an apron from my bag and bound it over my green uniform. Words burst out of Delilah. I woke up to see men toting her away with a sheet over her head. I walked over to her. How upsetting, Mrs. Garrett. I promise you, we did our utmost for Mrs. Devine, but the grip had lodged in her lungs, and in the end, It stopped her heart. Delilah Garrett sniffed shakily and pushed back a smooth curl. I shouldn't be in a hospital at all. My doctor said it's only a mild dose. That had been her constant refrain since arriving yesterday from her Protestant nursing home where the two midwives on staff had been knocked out by the flu. Delilah Garrett had walked in here wearing a ribboned hat and gloves rather than the old shawl typical of our patients. She was 20 years old with a genteel South Dublin accent, that sleek air of prosperity. Sister Luke tugged off her mackintosh sleeves and took her voluminous black cape from the peg. Mrs. Garrett's passed a comfortable night, she told me. Comfortable? The word made Delilah Garrett cough into the back of her hand. In this poky cubby in a back-breaking camp bed with people dying left and right? She sounds like quite a caution. Sister only means your flu symptoms are not worse.
Mhm.
I tucked a thermometer as well as my silver watch, attached by its fob chain, into the bib of my apron. I checked my belt, my buttons, everything had to fasten at the side so as to not scratch a patient. Delilah Garrett said, "So send me home today, why won't you?" The nun warned me that her pulse force and indication of blood pressure was still bounding. Sister Finnegan and I hadn't been able to decide if Delilah Garrett's flu was to blame for this hypertension. We often found the pulse force surged after the 5th month of pregnancy. Whatever the cause, there was no treatment but rest and calm. It sounds like she's just high strung. Excuse me.
High strung and poor.
Well,
What a combination.
she didn't sound poor.
They're all poor, I'm telling you.
Came in wearing a ribbon hat.
Oh, well, she's Protestant. That's all I'm saying. The Catholics were the poor nobodies.
Whatever the cause, there was no treatment but rest and calm. I said, "I do sympathize, Mrs. Garrett, but it's best if we keep an eye on you till you're quite well." I scrubbed my hands at the sink now, almost relishing the string of carbolic soap. If it didn't hurt a little, I wouldn't trust it.
Right?
That is
Like-
kind of how I feel about washing my hands now. I've washed them so much that I have sores on my hands. I looked over at the sleeper in the cot on the left. "And how's Mrs. Noonan been, sister?" "Much the same." The nun meant Ida Noonan was still away with the fairies. Oh, that's how they call it. Still away with the fairies. Since yesterday, the woman had been so dazed she wouldn't have noticed if the Pope had come from Rome to pay her a visit.
Oh, she was
Wow.
just out of it.
Out of it, yeah, with the fairies. The only mercy was that her delirium was of the low type, not the high kind, that could make sufferers chase, whack, or spit at us. Ooh. The night nurse added, "I poulticed her just before she dropped off, so that'll need changing by 11. Oh, so she applied a poultice to her. It's like a compound that they mix up. I know onions are in it. I don't know what else that they use.
Mustard.
Yeah, it's like stuff that they use to draw out
They
infection
slap it
back
on
in
your
the day.
chest.
I poulticed her, so that will need to be changed. I made myself nod. The messy rigmarole of preparing hot, moistened linseed. So this is what they used. Hot, moistened linseed and plastering it on the chests of congested patients was the bane of my life. The older nurses swore by poulticing, but I couldn't see that it achieved any more than a hot water bottle. It's probably true.
Mhm.
I asked, "When will Sister Finnegan be in?" "Oh, I'm afraid you're on your own, Nurse Power." She pointed to the ceiling. "Sister Finnegan in charge of maternity today. 4 deliveries on the go at once up there, and only Dr. Pendergrass left." Physicians were as rare as 4-leaf clovers. 5 of ours had enlisted and were serving in Belgium or France. 1 caught up in the rebel cause was in the Belfast prison. 6 were off sick. Dry-mouthed, I asked, "So I'm acting ward sister?" A shrug from Sister Luke. "At the moment like this, ours is not to reason why.
What?
Our superiors might be making unwise decisions, did the nun mean? Or was she just saying that I shouldn't balk at what any new burden laid on my shoulder?" She added, "Nurse Goans,
Where is it?
Geohan. Nurse Geohan's missing in action too," I sighed.
I would just say,
Marie Louise Geohan
yeah,
would
stick with
have been
that.
a great help. She was skilled at patient care, even if she still knew little of midwifery. In the current crisis, she'd been allowed to get her nursing certificate early. I would suspect we're going to start to see stuff like that too, when nurses become desperate. Like that's what happened in New York. People that were already in nursing school were allowed to, graduate sooner. And the nun straightened her wimple and hooked her black cape at the throat, ready to depart. A volunteer at the least. Another pair of hands? I'll have a word with staff on my way out, see what I can do for you. I forced myself to thank Sister Luke. As the door closed behind her, I was already rolling my sleeves up past my elbow despite the chill in the room. I buttoned on a pair of long starched cuffs. In a sole charge, I told myself, needs must, no time for whining. More light first, I went over to the small high window and tilted the green slats toward me. I spotted a blimp hovering high above Dublin port, watching for German submarines. I'd been taught that each patient should have 1,000 cubic feet, which meant a 10 by 10 foot space per bed. In this improvised ward, it was more like 10 by 3.
Hmm.
I wound the handle and angled the windows half open at the top to let more air in. Delilah Garrett complained, as if there wasn't already a drought. Oh, a
Draft?
draft, thank
Sorry.
you. Ventilation, crucial to recovery. "Mrs. Garrett, shall I get you another blanket?" "Oh, don't fuss." She went back to her magazine. The tight-sheeted cot between her and Ida Noonan was a reproach, a tomb blocking my path. I called up Eileen Devine's drooping face. She'd kept her dentures in a glass by her bed. Every baby seemed to cost these inner city women a handful of teeth. How she loved the hot bath I'd drawn for her 2 days ago. The first she'd ever had, she told me in a whisper, a luxury. Oh my gosh, that's so sad.
I told you they were the poorest of the poor.
A hot bath drawn for her.
Probably felt good before she died.
Yes, like someone really cared about her too. Okay, I think I need another sip of coffee.
Well, my mother was born in let's say that hospital, Dublin Hospital, in 1925, because they were poor. Only the poor people got born and died there.
I wished I could wheel Eileen Devine's empty cot out onto the landing to make a bit of room, but people would only bump into it. Also, I had no doubt we'd be getting another pregnant grip case to fill it anytime soon. Eileen Devine's chart from the wall behind the bed was already gone, presumably tucked in the corner cabinet under October 31st. We filed by date of discharge, which sometimes meant date of death. If I'd been the one to write the concluding line in the regulation tiny lettering that filled both sides of her sheet, I'd have been tempted to put worn down to the bone. Oh my goodness. Mother of 5 by age 24. It's the next line that's killing me. An underfed daughter. of underfed generations.
It makes me wonder how my grandmother and her siblings were able to survive.
White as paper, red-rimmed eyes, flat bosom, fallen arches, twig limbs, with veins that were tangles of blue twine. Eileen Devine had walked along a cliffed edge all her adult life. The flu, this great flu, had only tipped her over the edge. I think I have to stop there, babe. You're gonna have to read. I got 2 emo over Eileen's death. So it's just interesting. The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue.
I lost my book.
Is it underneath that stuff?
Oh, no, they do it.
Oh.
Oh, it fell on the floor.
We're
Sorry.
looking for Anne's book. Hold on.
Hold on.
Earthquake.
Sorry, I dropped it, I guess. I didn't see it dropped.
Whoa, whoa.
Small apartment. Okay, I'm going to continue reading Graham Norton's book, A Keeper. You can see him on there. He's a popular Irish, I guess he's a comedian, actor. He's a talk show host. He has his own talk show on Friday nights, Channel 95 on cable or whatever it is we have. And he has a talk show on
I think it's a BBC channel.
Yeah, BBC. Sorry, you got me all emotional from that dang book.
Yeah, me too. Sorry.
He has a talk show. I love his talk show on Friday nights at 11 p.m. Channel 95. Anyway.
He's gay.
Oh,
by the way.
Yes, that's why we're reading it. And I'll just read you a little bit of what it says on the back here. Elizabeth Keane returns to Ireland after her mother's death, intent only on wrapping up that part of her life. And perhaps she had not found the small stash of letters. The truth would never have come to light had she not found it. 40 years earlier, a young woman stumbles from a remote stone house into the darkness and away from the cliffs and sea. She has no sense of where she is going, only that she must keep on. This compelling novel confirms Graham Norton's status, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I have, here it is, sorry. So I'm starting from channel 29, second paragraph. Well, Patricia and her friend Rosemary were sitting in a coffee place. This is Elizabeth's mother back when she was younger, and she was sitting in a place with her friend eating like eclairs and stuff. Okay, 2 weeks later, an overexcited Rosemary was doing her best to run up Convent Hill, her purple coat flapping behind her, a newspaper gripped in one hand, while the other tried to control her black patent shoulder bag. She looked like a bishop fleeing the scene of some nocturnal indiscretion. Outside number 62, she rang the bell and leaned panting against the porch. Outside the number 62, she rang the bell and leaned panting against the pillar of the porch. When Patricia opened the door, she was confronted by the face of her friend, even redder than normal and framed by her coarse dark curls glistening with sweat. Rosemary didn't speak. She simply thrust the rolled up paper into Patricia's hand. They both looked at the paper and then simultaneously began to shriek. It had arrived. At the kitchen table, they smoothed out the paper and then Rosemary quickly flicked to the section at the back. Her chewed nail ran down the various ads. Bantry Bachelor, Fermana medium-sized farmer, romantic tea/tea. Here it was, lonely Leinster lady, because she lives in Leinster. The wording had been Rosemary's handiwork. Patricia had favored something a little more discreet, but she was told in no uncertain terms that discretion was not going to help her find a husband. Rosemary had also advised lowering her age or not mentioning it at all, but Patricia had insisted, arguing that she didn't want any potential relationship to start with a lie. Early 30s had been settled upon, though if Rosemary had been totally honest, she thought that that made her friend sound 40 if she was a day. After the initial excitement of actually seeing the ad in print and reassuring each other about how well it looked and the quality of it compared to the other advertisements, the women felt oddly deflated. There was now nothing to do but wait. Days, then a week, then a fortnight, and still no response. Every morning, Patricia found herself waiting for the postman. Some days, nothing. On other days, the familiar clank of the letterbox as an envelope hit the mat with the most gentle of thuds. But every day, disappointment. She cursed herself for ever listening to Rosemary. This was worse than before. At least in the pre-advertisement age of her life, she had been lonely, but now she was rejected as well. She had taken to walking the long way round just to avoid Bunkara beauty and Rosemary's face peering expectantly at her through the window. She imagined people smirking at the sight of her because they had worked out that she was the lonely Leinster lady. She berated herself for daring to think that she might have had a chance at a second beginning. Why hadn't she simply accepted what everyone else knew? She was a spinster. What an ugly word. She tried the word out as she combed her hair in the mirror. Spinster. The skin was still free of wrinkles, and yet, as she repeated the word to her unsmiling face, she imagined her hair starting to take on a grayish hue. Nothing wrong with that. It was the day before the 3-week anniversary of sending away her ad and postal order when the thud on the mat sounded just a little more substantial. Patricia stood frozen in the kitchen. She wanted to run and check, but hated herself for being so easy to humiliate. Forcing herself to take another sip of her tea, she put the mug down on the table and walked at a steady pace to the door. She leaned against the frame and slowly craned her neck around the corner to see into the hall. A large brown envelope, too big for a bill. Could it? She inched forward and bent to turn it over. A gasp. There, clear as day, in the top left-hand corner, was the legend, The Irish Farmer's Journal. She picked it up and scampered back to the kitchen. Inside there were 4 further envelopes. Inside the first was a postcard depicting the ruins of Ennis Friary beneath a chemical blue sky. An odd choice, Patricia thought. She turned it over and read, "You sound like a ride." She dropped the card on the table with a start. Why on earth would anyone write that? Why would the journal send it on to her? Pushing the postcard to one side, she cautiously opened the next envelope. This at least was a letter. It was written on lined paper in what appeared to be a very unsteady hand. With difficulty, Patricia deciphered that this was from a man who lived in Tullamore. Not too far away, she thought. He had been married twice before. She didn't like the sound of that. As if reading her thoughts, he continued by reassuring her that his past relationships ensured he knew what he was doing. Patricia doubted that this was the man for her. He had been a farmer, but was now living in a care home. Oh, great. Oh, for God's sake. Did she have her own did she have her own house? She crumpled the thin paper into a ball. The third, he's asking her, did she have her own house?
Right. That's not a good sign.
She crumpled the thin paper into a ball, like hell no. The third envelope contained a card with a drawing of a blue tit, that's a bird, perched on a branch on the front.
In case
Sorry.
you didn't know, it's a bird.
Oh my God, but I could like see it. Oh. Oh.
Cracked me up with that one.
It was from a man in Carlo who thought it perfectly acceptable to ask her for a photograph of herself in her bra and panties. She was torn between being furious with Rosemary and impatient to share these shocking replies with her just to hear her friend's big throaty laugh. What a waste of time and money. The fourth letter looked different. It was written in black ink on the same Basildon bond blue notepaper her mother had favored. The handwriting was neat and, more importantly, didn't look insane. A small black and white photo fell on the table. A middle-aged man, 40, was standing beside an old-fashioned steam engine. His hand rested on the large metal rim of the wheel by the driver's side. He was staring straight into the camera and oddly wasn't smiling, but nor did he look too serious or sad. Patricia decided that benign was how she would describe him. His dark hair receded on either side of his forehead, leaving a widow's peak, and his large dark eyes seemed kind. She peered closer. Yes, definitely kind. He was dressed simply in a white shirt, open at the collar, with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and the belt of his dark trousers showed off his slim waist. He didn't set Patricia's heart racing, but she wasn't repulsed either, and at this point that seemed like winning. Winning. She started to read his letter. Second chapter. Could people tell? Patricia scanned the other passengers in the train carriage. A bald, rubber-faced businessman engrossed in his newspaper, a young woman playing I Spy with her two bored children, an older lady absent-mindedly sucking her teeth as she knitted something small and pink. Not one of them seemed aware of her existence. They appeared to be oblivious to the fact that at the age of 32, she was embarking on the most exciting and scandalous, yes, that was the very word, scandalous adventure of her whole life. Rosemary had been given a lift to the train station in Kilkenny. They had hugged each other on the platform, and then as the train pulled in, she had tied a bright red and yellow scarf around Patricia's neck. Oh, they won't miss her then. To brighten you up a bit, Patricia looked crestfallen and cast a glance down at her navy coat and black shoes. Do I not look all right? She asked, with an edge of panic creeping into her voice. No, no, you look beautiful, Rosemary held her arms and looked into her friend's eyes. You really do. The train had come to a standstill. Whistles were being blown, doors slammed. Good luck. I can't wait to hear all about it. I'll be waiting for you here tonight. Thanks so much, Rosemary. You're great. Patricia stepped onto the train and looked back. Bye. Then she let out a loud, nervous laugh that was almost a cry for help. You'll be grand. Whatever confidence she might have had slowly evaporated during the long journey, which involved having to change trains twice. By the time they went through a series of long tunnels approaching Cork Station, Patricia felt very unsure indeed. One of the children had begun to cry because they didn't want to put their red wool hat on, and the businessman was heaving himself into his overcoat. The end of the line. Patricia stood on the platform for a moment to get her bearings. The large sign showing the way out was down the platform to her right. She retied the belt on her coat and twisted Rosemary's scarf so that the knot was to one side in what she hoped was a jaunty fashion. She put one foot in front of the other and gripped her handbag tightly in an effort to stop her hands from shaking. Her heart felt as if it was vibrating. It was beating so quickly. In her mind, she repeated her mantra, "You'll be grand, you'll be grand." Outside seemed very bright and loud. Cars were streaming along the road beyond the car park in front of the station. Looking around, she quickly saw the kiosk with the large Cork Examiner sign above it, and there, just behind it, she recognized Edward waiting for her. In truth, the way he had positioned himself, it seemed closer to hiding than waiting. She wondered if he had seen her. He was staring studiously in the opposite direction. God, this had all been an awful mistake. She wanted to walk straight back to the station and get on the next train home, the next one anywhere. No, she had come all this way, and his letters had been lovely. Edward Foley was going to meet her whether he wanted to or not. Shall I continue? Edward? No response. The man's head remained facing the other way. Could she see him quivering? Edward? She repeated a little louder. This time the old man selling papers tapped him on the shoulder, and he was forced to turn around. The dark eyes that had seemed so kind in the photograph were wide with fear. His mouth hung open. Patricia wasn't sure what to do next. She offered her hand and said, "Hello, I'm Patricia." Sorry, that was too English. Edward looked at her hands. Edward looked at her hand as if he had never seen one before and certainly didn't know what to do with it. Patricia felt the hot flush of embarrassment. The old paper seller was smirking as he observed their slow, stiff puppet show. She worried that he might cry, but then, as if someone had flicked a switch, Edward took her hand and shook it. His skin was warm and rough. The simple handshake seemed strangely intimate. Their eyes met for a moment before he quickly turned his gaze to the ground. "Hello." His voice was deep and hoarse. Even from one word, she could hear his thick Cork accent. As if out from his efforts to be social, Edward let his arm fall to his side and uttered no more. Patricia sighed deeply. This was going to be a very long day. "Will we take a walk?" she suggested. He risked a quick peek at her face and then began to walk away. Patricia took this as a sign of agreement, so she followed him. They walked in silence till they reached a set of traffic lights. Edward indicated to the left and informed Patricia, "The river is down there." "The banks of the Lee," Patricia said, referring to the old song. Edward stared at her as if she had just made a statement in ancient Hebrew. "Yes, just down there." He began to walk again. Patricia wondered what he would do if she didn't follow him, but she did. Patricia wondered what he would do if she didn't follow him, but she did. They walked down to a metal bridge. On the other bank of the other river buses were shuttering their way in and out of the station. The people on the pavement brushed past them, all seeming in a great hurry. Lives being lived all around her, while she was lumbered with this strange man who didn't seem to have the slightest interest in her. Halfway across the bridge, Edward stopped and looked over the balustrade down into the murky water. Patricia did the same. There was a strong wind off the river, and her hair blew around her face. She knew she must look a right state, but she didn't care. She heard something and looked at Edward, and Edward realized he was speaking quietly. She leaned in to hear him. I loved her dearly, both true and sincerely. There is no one in this wide world I loved so much as she. What in God's name was he talking about? Every blush, every bower, every wild Irish flower. It reminds me of my Mary on the banks of the Lee. Of course, now she understood. Her head bowed. She began to speak, and the two voices found each other on the wind. So I will pluck my love some roses, some wild Irish roses. I will pluck my love some roses, the fairest that ever grew, and I will place them on the mound of my own darling true love, in that cold and dewy valley where she lies beneath the dew. That was sad. The lyric ended, their voices silent. She turned to look, he turned to look at her and smiled. His face was kind. Patricia smiled back. She tried to think of something to say, a way to keep the momentum going, but she couldn't. Then he turned and began to walk again. She followed. The lunch was torture. He slurped down his vegetable soup without comment while she sipped at her small glass of grapefruit juice. When the young waitress was clearing their starters away, she gave Patricia a small smile of encouragement and sympathy. A series of questions about his journey, the farm, his mother, all failed to ignite anything that resembled conversation. The solitary question he asked her during the whole day was if he inquired was when he inquired if her chicken was dry. No, no, it's fine, thanks. Looks dry, he commented as he sawed a thick slice of lamb. Somehow the fact that he was right and her meal had the texture of chalkboard only made things worse. It was as if it was his fault. Finally, they were back at the station, half an hour too early for her train, but Patricia really didn't care. She just wanted the day to end. They stood facing each other at the entrance, and he was just about to shake her hand. She was just about to shake his hand and thank him for the lunch when he thrust his head forward like a cuckoo exiting a clock to announce the hour. Before she knew what was happening, he had pecked her at the lips. She let out an involuntary yelp of surprise. She let out an involuntary yelp of surprise. Oh, sorry, He searched for one of his few words. No, it's. Patricia too was struggling. Well, yes, I'll leave you so. Right. Thanks for the lunch. Now
Okay.
he was.
Okay, thanks for lunch. I think we're gonna stop there.
Well, let me just finish this. And up to here.
Oh, okay.
Right. Thanks for the lunch. Thanks for letting me finish. Now he was staring at her, his shoulders hunched, his hands knotting and twisting his fingers. Patricia longed for him to go, but still he stood there. Go, she silently screamed at him. In her head, surely he wasn't enjoying this either. His face looked as if he was thinking about something else, remembering the great sadness. Sorry, he whispered and turned quickly to walk away. Patricia suddenly wanted to call after him, to somehow reassure him, make him feel better about how the day had gone. She thought about the man who knew all the words of the banks of the Lee. Why hadn't she been able to spend the afternoon with that man? How had the man who had written her such sweet letters been turned to stone in her presence? Patricia walked beneath the large station clock, confident there wouldn't be a next time. That's the end of the second chapter.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for tuning in today. Again, my name is Lynn Wood. I'm a student services assistant at East Los Angeles College, and I'm here to support you. If you need help, you need guidance, I can help answer questions or direct you around in our system, Connex Ed or Cranium Cafe, or just applying to the college in general. Feel free to reach out. I know we're approaching finals. I wish you the best of luck in finals, and just remember everything's going to be okay. This is temporary. Tomorrow's another day. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. Wish you the best. Thanks for reading today, babe.
Thanks for letting me read.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you next week. Right? Yeah, still next week. Of course, we'll take off for the holidays, but we're not there yet. It's like I feel like December happened and all of a sudden it's the end of December. Not quite. It's only the 8th, Lynn. Calm down.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later. Take care.